Hey everyone, I hope you are having a wonderful day so far. I am just dropping this special little clip into all the episodes. So, no matter what episode you're listening to, this is actually pretty current as of July 2024. I wanted to come on here and just say a big thank you to Earworthy because the Life Shift podcast was just named the best overall podcast of the year in the first Earworthy Independent Podcast Awards. And you've probably seen some articles written about the Life Shift podcast before, written by Earworthy. And now he is launching from his online publication, he is launching these yearly winners of independent podcast awards. And these are specifically for indie podcasters. We are those that wear all the hats. We create the show. Some people write the show. We're producers, sound engineers. We troubleshoot all the tech. We do any kind of research if we need to. We host the shows. We distribute the shows. We do all the things that relate to our shows because we love it. And it's so nice to see my name in a list with some other amazing podcasts like Multispective, which won Best Life Lessons Podcast. Salad with a Side of Fries won Best Health Podcast. Bippity Boppity Business won Best Business Advice Podcast. And there are so many more. And so I just want to come on here and say thank you to Earworthy for not only doing these awards every year and just honoring some of us indie podcasters that sometimes feel like we're just shouting into the void, but we're not. We're just doing what brings us joy, and hopefully through that work it brings other people joy. In my case, for the Life Shift, I hope that each episode finds the ears that needed to hear it the most so that they feel a little less alone in their circumstance. But also, Earworthy writes all these amazing publications pretty much weekly, every week, every weekday, I should say, where he writes on Blogger, Medium, Substack, Tumblr, Vocal, Many Stories, and for other places. And he really just highlights the independent podcasters. So thank you, Frank, for everything you do with Earworthy and for recognizing all of us in the first Earworthy Independent Podcast Awards. If you'd like to read more, please head to medium.com/EAR hyphen WORTHY. Thanks again and enjoy this episode. I'm Matt Gilhooly, and this is The Life Shift, candid conversations about the pivotal moments that change lives forever. My friend, I am here with Adrienne. She's a good friend of mine, but we have a interesting backstory, don't we, my friend?
Oh, we sure do.
So let's see, 2003.
Yeah, that'd be about right.
2003, we took a creative writing class together, and that's all I remember. I don't remember any moment from there besides that.
Right. No, we sat next to each other in the back of the classroom on occasion. And then I think that we did some like study groups or group work at your house on one or two occasions.
We did? Wow. Well, that was so long ago that I can barely remember.
Right.
But at some point, we became friends on social media.
Correct.
Right? And I was following all the fancy vegan food snacks that you were creating and posting about. And that was it. Like, we didn't really communicate too much. It was kind of back and forth here and there. And then 2018.
Yeah.
2018, the beginning of 2018, I had just quit a toxic job that was not something that was good for my soul. And I had time to travel. And so I put out just a message on Facebook saying, hey, anyone want to go for like a 10-day adventure or 2-week adventure or whatever it may be? And then it was like crickets. And then you responded, which we had never hung out.
Yep. I said, hey, Thailand sounds like a really cool trip. I've always wanted to go, and I have some vacation time and some savings to do it. So let's meet up and plan to do this thing.
On the other side of the world.
Right. Yeah.
And like, we had never hung out for more. I think we met up for some food and we kind of planned it out. But I mean, one of the most memorable and best vacations I've ever been
Oh, for
on.
sure. It was one of my favorites too.
Yeah, we went for 10 days. We went to Bangkok, we went to Chiang Mai, we went to Phuket. We hung out with the
Yeah.
elephants.
And people
We
awkwardly asked us if we were married.
That's right. We got awkward massage things every so often. There was lots of interesting time, and I'm sure people can imagine if they've ever been to Thailand, some of the awkwardness. But we also had a really great time, and we kind of forged a great friendship that has continued since then. But I wanted to have you on the show because you have a particular moment or moments that have really shifted your life, and in this case significantly better than before. And so I wanted you to share those moments. But before you tell us like that pivotal part, I think you can just maybe introduce kind of like what you do and where you were before, like mentally, physically.
Absolutely. I have for a long time worked in the technology industry. I've worked as a software engineer. I've done also on like the customer side, I've done account management, and I do product management now. So I handle a lot of like business requirements for software projects. I'm a big nerd, basically. Yeah, I
You're
studied
smart.
computer science, and then I got into computer science related jobs, and I love all of it. I love learning. I love research. I love creative problem solving, and I think that some of those things tie into the journey that we're going to talk about. And so that part
Yeah.
of my life was very interesting. I was, unbeknownst to you at the time, because we didn't talk about our life struggles very much. I had been diagnosed with PTSD from a very toxic marriage that I was in my early 20s. And it left me with a lot of emotional challenges. I had trouble regulating my emotions. I was in these places where I had chronic anxiety. I had bouts of depression with suicidal ideation. My job was a struggle for me because when trauma can look like ADHD. And so it makes it hard to focus because you're always ruminating on all the bad things that can happen in your life. And it affected my relationships with my friends and
Right.
with my family. And most of what I was able to see were the challenging parts of my life. And it was really difficult for me to see all the good things and all the potential because I had a really hard time feeling happy. And I had a therapist for a very long time following my divorce as well. And she was the one who diagnosed me and helped me to realize that I had been living with what is known as complex trauma or complex PTSD from years of emotional abuse that I had endured in that relationship. And I didn't realize how much of a toll it had taken on me because at that point, 2018, I was in my mid 30s. And so, I'd been living like this for my entire adult life. I didn't know what normal was. I didn't know what happy was.
Right. Right. Well, you probably thought that was your normal.
That was my normal.
Right.
But I didn't know what it was to have a good life, to have happy, healthy relationships with people. I didn't know what it felt like to really feel like I was being successful, to feel like I was moving forward in life. It was, I really identify with a lot of people who post on social media about, the struggles with mental illness and how it is an invisible illness. And you never know what people are dealing with because I was one of those people for a really
Right.
long time. And it was, daily living was quite a struggle for me. So that's where I was at that time in my life.
Yeah. So that was in 2018.
Yeah. So that was my entire adulthood leading up to 2018. So from basically ages 18 to 36, 18 years of my life.
Wow. And so that impact, as you just described, pretty much impacted every component, every like friendships, relationships, family life,
Yeah.
work. That was like your day in, day out was in this mindset that probably was very difficult. And I'm sorry that you had to go through that.
Thanks. But yeah, so, when you have trauma, it affects the way that you see everything in life.
Right.
You view things through the traumatized lens, and your brain gets used to experiencing that trauma and expects that trauma is the new norm
Right.
and that bad things will happen. And another thing that I dealt with is what my therapist called dissociation. And dissociation is when you're exposed to things that are difficult, the mind will block them or tune them out. And that's the way of dealing with things. Instead of feeling them, you tune out. And as a result, you may have trouble recording and holding on to memories. And so I have a lot of missing pieces of my life from that time. There are lots of things I can't remember. My friends have to remind me about things that happened during that time in my life, and I still can't remember a lot of them. And that's an important detail, I think, because it was part of the catalyst moment that led me to where I am.
Right. So that dissociation is almost like your brain or body is protecting or trying to protect you from
Yeah.
additional trauma.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So we have different ways of dealing with trauma and stress. You might have heard of fight or flight, but there's a third
Mm-hmm.
one called freeze or play dead, right? And that's the notion of tuning out. And that's where dissociation comes in. And so you'll see this with a lot of people that have trauma. They don't want to be present with the pain. And so you can just mentally tune out. And when you're stressed, it's also more difficult to um, create and maintain memories as well. So you live in that constant stress cycle, and it's really hard to remember things on the short term and in the long term. That was wreaking havoc on my daily life as well, because I couldn't keep anything straight,
Right.
and I couldn't remember like good things that were happening in my life too, which further compounded the depression that I was dealing with.
So this might sound like an ignorant question. As someone that has had bouts of depression and those kind of things, I do notice that when you are in those moments, that it's, I don't want to say easier, but it feels easier to stay in those moments than it does to quote unquote do the work to get out of those moments. Is it similar in a case as extreme as what you experienced?
I'm going to say yes, because when you're in a state of that chronic trauma, the
Mm-hmm.
things that lead you to the complex trauma diagnosis, right? The idea is that you're in a situation for a long period of time that you feel like you can't escape from. And so when you feel like you can't escape, there's a part of yourself that just gives up. And that's the checking out process. And so you have to get to a place where you feel safe enough in your body and in your mind before you can start to deal with the trauma.
Right. Well, there's a positive to this story, at least from how I know you now. So that seems like at some point there was a tipping point for you in which you needed to seek something to become the person you are today. So do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, yeah. So I'll talk about my mental breakdown. um,
Hey, I think here before you do that, I think it's important to think about because or talk about because so many people stigmatize mental health and issues like this, and we're all human and we face similar things whether they're super extreme or not. I think other people are going to relate to your story. So
yeah,
before we go into that, I think it's super important and brave of you to share what you're about to share.
thanks. I jokingly call it my mental breakdown. More technically, it's probably what would be referred to as a flashback, right? With PTSD, people can
Mm-hmm.
experience flashbacks. And with complex PTSD, it's a little bit different from acute PTSD. Acute PTSD is caused by like one specific bad thing that happened, like maybe if you were involved in like a hostage situation, or you saw somebody murdered, as an example. Complex trauma happens over long periods of time. And so the flashbacks aren't always necessarily at a single instance. There
Mm-hmm.
could be emotional flashbacks, right? About
Right.
the intense things that you felt. And so these waves of intense emotion that you feel like you can't escape from can creep up on you. And I had one of these such incidents. What had happened was I was visiting my family for Thanksgiving that year in 2018. And, it was a safe space,
Hmm.
giving my mind a place to relax and kind of like check out and give myself some recovery time from, a stressful job, stressful life. And the day after Thanksgiving, my sister wanted to put up the Christmas tree as we do every year, traditionally.
Hmm.
And she put up the tree and she handed me a Christmas ornament that I had made for her and given her because I used to do stained glass as a hobby, and I made her this stained glass ornament. And she handed it to me, and I had no recollection of making it. I had no recollection of giving it to her. And I just, at that point, I was just experiencing this despair at not being able to remember the good things in my life that had
Right.
happened during that period of time. I realized I became more aware of how much was missing. And that is what led me to this downward spiral. And so that's when I started to have all of these flashbacks of these intense feelings of despair and darkness and, a deeper level of depression than I've ever felt. It's the realization that all of these pieces of my life were missing and that I might never get them back. And that,
Right.
that was a profound loss for me that was coming to the surface and that I was realizing because it's, I would describe it as another form of grief. When you lose something that's important to you, you know that it's not going to be there again. Somebody close to you might pass away and you
Right.
know that you're not going to be able to make new memories with that person. And so this was like a form of grief for me because I was aware at all of the memories that were gone from my life that I would never get back. And so I fell into this really dark spiral. At the time, I was living 6.5 hours away from my family. And I spent the whole car ride crying home over, all of the things that I was feeling. I couldn't stop crying.
Right.
And I got home, and I fell into this like deep depression for days. And I called out of work. I called my friends and I said, I don't want to hang out. I just shut the door and hid in my room from everybody,
Right.
basically.
You couldn't function
No,
really.
it was like the least functional that I'd ever felt in my entire life. And I had bouts of depression before, but this is by far
Right.
the worst that had ever crept up on me.
Wow. At what point did you hit that wall in which it was time for you to climb out?
This was definitely my rock bottom. And, if you've read any Eckhart Tolle, would even call it, my dark night of the soul, the point in which you find the place where all of the darkness hits you and you want to give up and you crawl out and find the light on the other side. And so for me, I think that moment happened when I was just, I climbed into the shower and like just let the hot water hit me. And I remember just kind of like sitting in the corner crying, and like, thinking all of these terrible things and basically, kind of like crying out to the universe or, whatever is listening, because I'm an atheist, and saying, you know, fix this shit right now or get me off the
Right.
planet because I don't want to live like this. This is not the human experience that I want to have. I want to be happy. I want to be joyful. I want to have a life that I enjoy living and actively being a part of. And
Right.
so over the next couple of days, I started to feel a little bit calmer. I didn't, I was starting to level out a little bit, and
Right.
I felt like it was just this waiting game, waiting for my body to calm down from this crisis that had happened to me. And within a week, I started, somewhere in my mind, we remember things that we don't always
Hmm.
consciously hold on to. Everything that we experience goes into some subconscious part of our mind.
Right.
And within a week, I started to have this strong desire to seek out psilocybin bearing mushrooms. Some people might call them magic mushrooms. A lot of people use them recreationally, but there are a lot of studies being done on how psilocybin and other substances like MDMA can help to treat the traumatized brain. And mushrooms suddenly came into my awareness as something that could be a very interesting treatment for me.
Right. Well, and before you go deeper, I think what's important to know is that I've always known you as someone that takes the time to research things deeply. So we live in a society in which people take a lot of things at face value. They read the summary, they read the top line headline, but you're not one of those people. You dive into the science, you dive into the details. You don't just take one study. So I think that's important to note too, is that this is not, even though you pulled this from your subconscious,
Right.
I'm aware that you are a person in which you would research the heck out of
Oh,
it
for sure.
before you did something. So what did you do?
So the first thing, that I do whenever I have a curiosity is, like you said, I research the heck out of it because I need to
Mm-hmm.
know, why has this come into my awareness, first of all, and secondly, what am I going to do with it if I do anything at all with it? And as I mentioned, I've always been, this corporate professional, pretty straight laced, clean diet, hippie kind of person. Like I barely drink coffee. I don't like to
Right.
take painkillers. I try to eat a
But
lot
you
of
like mangoes.
I did, yeah, as we learned on our trip to Thailand. I love mangoes, or organic food, and I don't generally enjoy being in altered states. Even in the past few years, I've completely quit drinking alcohol. So this was kind of a radical idea that had come into my awareness that I was considering.
Right.
And so I started to look it up. What are the studies saying about trauma and psilocybin and all of these other things? And I found some information that was, you know, convincing enough to make me more curious. A lot of people, when you ask them about it, their inclination is that microdosing is the right thing to do. I've shared this story with some other people, and they said, "Oh, so you did microdosing?" And I said, "No, I did not do microdosing." And it's not a large dose either. So based on the studies that I found, it would appear that the ideal dose at the time for treating PTSD was between 1 and 1.5 grams. It's a very small amount. It's not even enough to
Right.
make you hallucinate, which was actually kind of a relief for me because I wasn't ready to have that kind of experience. You
Right.
know,
Considering the state you were in.
exactly. I'm the kind of person, I have to carefully consider things, and I don't. I used to have a lot of control issues at the time, and I didn't like knowing that I was going to do something when I didn't know what was coming. Right? It's
Right.
especially coming from a place of trauma. That was one
Mm-hmm.
of my coping strategies. Was like I always need to be aware of what's coming so that I know I can feel safe. And so
Right.
the next question was, well, where the heck am I going to get mushrooms? Like
Yeah.
I'm this
It's a good question.
right? Like I'm a good girl. I don't do things like that. I don't know where to find stuff like that. And probably within a few days of doing this research and coming into this awareness, one of my friends out of the blue sent me a text message and said, "Hey, somebody gifted me some mushrooms for Christmas. Do you want to come try them with me?" I was like, well, funny you should mention that because I'm kind of going through some stuff, and I've been really curious about whether this might be a tool for my treating my PTSD. And so we
I
agreed.
mean, if that's not the universe
Right?
stepping in,
It was oddly coincidental. Like,
yeah.
first of all, I didn't think that I knew anybody that had access to that, and second of all, why would they think of me? So my friend had called me up, and I said, "Yeah, I'm actually really curious to do this on like a very small dose kind of basis." And we agreed to set a date when everybody was available. We set up a very calm and comforting environment outside on a nice day at the end of December, which in Florida is uh, beautiful, right?
Right.
Because Florida doesn't really have winter. It was like 70 degrees and sunny under the shade of some oak trees on a nice soft picnic blanket kind of a thing. It's what most people would call summer.
Right. Or fall.
Right. So we did this, and I set an intention
Mm-hmm.
that I was going to have a calm and peaceful experience, and that I was going to allow whatever was going to happen. And I tried to remain calm as I could start to feel it affecting me. And, you
Right.
know,
Which is probably hard to do.
right. And so I started a very small amount. I didn't even start with the the amount in the studies. I started with like half a gram, which anybody who's familiar with mushrooms would probably laugh at. They'll be like, that's not going to do anything. But I could feel it because I'm very in tune with my body, and I can feel these
Right.
subtleties, which is why I shy away from a lot of this stuff. And I started to notice over the next couple of days that my baseline level of operation, my moods were a little bit calmer. And that was noticeably different for me, to not constantly feel the agitation
Right.
inside. And so I let him know, and he said, well, I have some more if you want to come back. So I went back and did it a second time. And this time I kind of worked my way up to 1 gram.
Right.
And then I started to see some noticeable differences. And after that, I didn't want to invite myself over and, take advantage and be like, okay, can I have some more of your mushrooms, please? Because they were
Right.
organic, right? So then the next step was, well, where am I going to find more of these mushrooms?
Yeah. Where do I get my own?
Right. How do I get my own? I kid you not. Within a week, another friend approached me and said, we were gifted some mushrooms from a friend, but we don't do them. Do you want them? I think that some people have this, idea that because I'm kind of a hippie, I've taken herbalism classes. I make a lot of my
Right.
own, legal medicinal components that, this might be something of interest. And I said, yeah, as a matter of fact. And I kind of relayed the story. And I said, I am kind of curious and I would be happy to take them. And so I was gifted 7 grams, which, in this very small protocol goes a long way.
Right.
And so over the next 5 or 6 months, I did, 1 to 1.5 grams every 3 to 4 weeks, whenever I had like a free weekend. And I wanted to give myself time to really reflect on how I was feeling and not rush the process. And, the end of the story is that after that period of time, I felt like I had a new brain. It was noticeably different. I felt like I was able to process things without having that underlying filter of what's going to go wrong in my life, or constantly feeling that my body was agitated. And so then one of the things that I immediately noticed was that therapy started to be more beneficial for me. Up until that point, I had really struggled with therapy. And I think a lot of people with trauma or any kind of mental illness or mood disorders can relate with this. It's when you constantly feel like you're not feeling better and that your emotions aren't changing, no matter how much you talk about this stuff, it feels like an uphill battle. It feels like you can't ever win, and you want to quit. And I didn't, that wasn't working for me. And so I started to notice that now when I went back and talked to, therapist, life coach, whatever, about this stuff, that suddenly I felt like the things that we were talking about were more meaningful, and that it was easier for me to let go because my body was reacting better to having the conversations and being able to talk about my trauma without everything, spilling over and being overwhelmed.
Yeah. And so it's been like 2 years since you, or 2.5.
So
I don't know what year we're in these days.
Right. It's been almost 3 years. 3
years.
2.5.
And do you feel, compared to that quote unquote meltdown time period, how do you feel now, 2022, comparatively?
I feel like I'm winning at life. It's I feel like a completely different person. I don't even recognize the person that I used to be. And so what happened after that is I started aggressively working on self-development because I suddenly had new motivation. I felt like all of that stuff would work for me.
You had hope.
I had hope. That's exactly right. I suddenly felt like I had hope that I could, survive my own reality, and that I could heal myself, and that I could, form these new neural networks with kinder experiences in
Mm-hmm.
my life. And so I made a lot of life-changing decisions at that time. 2018 was a year where I started to let go of things that weren't serving me. And 2019 was the year where, for the first half of the year, I was treating myself with
Mm-hmm.
small doses of psilocybin because I was desperate to find
Right.
treatment for my PTSD. And so after that, I started devouring all of these self-development books. I started looking into all of these healthy holistic practices. I got certified as a yoga teacher because yoga was very healing for me. It helped me to
Mm-hmm.
reconnect with my body because they teach yoga isn't just about the movement. It's about connecting with your breath and connecting with your body and really being present through the movements. And so that practice, really helped to cultivate a lot of what I was missing because I had checked out of my own body so often that I wasn't really aware of what it was like, to just be present with myself.
Right. And I feel like for a while there, you were very focused on, and this might have been before, you were focused on heavy lifting. You were doing a lot of that, and that was probably related to the PTSD and the aggression that you could exert. Do you think?
Well, yes and no. Yes, mostly. So for me, the exercise habit started back in 2015, partially because I was in my mid 30s and I felt like I was much, much older and everything in my body hurt. And I thought I shouldn't be living like this. But once I started doing it, I
Mm-hmm.
realized that all of that movement on a regular basis really helped with my stress levels. And because I
Mm.
was constantly stressed, constantly anxious. And so I started to
Right.
exercise a lot. I started to exercise hard and very frequently because that was a form of therapy. It was a form of self medication
Right.
for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think a lot of people can relate to that too. And I think what's interesting is that since then, and since this kind of self-treatment that you went through, you've kind of morphed more towards that connection with your body through the yoga and those breathing practices, and less of a, maybe some kettlebells here and there, but less of throwing around, your 250-pound deadlifts
Right,
and
right.
things like
I'll have
that.
you know, I never actually reached 250, but I really wanted to. No, I still lift a lot, but my practice and the way that I approach it has changed. I have,
Right.
done a shift to more like mindful movement and mobility based practice. I still lift heavy, but I'm more aware of the movements that I have when I'm doing that. I'm not doing it from the perspective of trying to prove anything to myself, to try to prove that I can be strong because I felt so
Right.
weak. I do it now as a form of self-care to help maintain the functionality of my body as I'm stepping into middle age. But hey, I'm even approaching my exercise with a completely different attitude. I think a much healthier one now. And I'm much better too at realizing when it is I need to take rest, which was very hard for me
Right.
before. When you have trauma, you feel like you always need to go, go, go. Because when you stop and rest, what happens? You're forced to sit with your pain and
Right.
think about all of those things.
And I think people that face any type of mental health concerns, such as depression and those things, are very similar. It's if you, as soon as you stop, that's when everything kind of comes over like a big giant wave, having been there myself. And so you just kind of keep busy, which is not great in itself either, because you're breaking down your body in other ways.
Yeah.
But what's interesting to me is that you talk about this treatment that you found for yourself, which on the grand scheme of things was like smaller than like what fits in your hand, right? And it essentially changed your entire
It
life.
did.
Like it's like something that is natural
Yeah.
in a way, right? Solved years and years, or not solved, but helped recover from
Yeah.
years and years of trauma. And I will say, watching you through the last couple years of the pandemic, I often say that you are the winner of the pandemic because of, one, the self-development that you've done just as a person, and the things that you've taught yourself, and the things that you've let go of and grown from, and all those pieces, but also like just you took this opportunity, if we'll call the pandemic an opportunity for you, you took it as an opportunity to really change and shift your life into ways that made your heart happy.
Yeah.
Which I think is super inspiring, and something that you probably, that 2018 version of yourself, could never imagine
Oh, for sure.
where you are right now. And I just think that's amazing.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. If I was still living as, 2018 and before Adrienne,
Mm-hmm.
I would not have made the moves that I have, made figuratively and literally. I would not be doing the things
Mm-hmm.
that I'm doing. I wouldn't be approaching life with the mindset that I'm approaching it with. I was stuck in a lot of old patterns, and I've been more and more comfortable with leaning into my discomfort. And what
Mm-hmm.
has resulted of that is, with reconnecting to myself, I've learned to listen to my intuition about what's really good for me and what's really not good for me. I've learned to recognize my patterns. I've learned to recognize when I have fear and denial, when I have an old belief that's holding me back. Um, I've learned to set better boundaries. That was huge for me. 2018, Adrienne
Right.
had no boundaries, and stepping out of a string of bad relationships, I can clearly see where the problems were, and there was a long period of time where I worked very hard on boundaries, both for myself and for others, learning what's acceptable for me to say and do, and what's acceptable for other people to say and do in order to honor myself and my energy levels and my self-care needs. And I think that when we have trauma, we become disconnected from ourselves, and it's really hard to just go with the flow, because if you don't trust yourself, you can't trust other people, and you can't trust the things that are happening to you, and you can't trust your environment. It's very hard to trust anything in your reality. And so I think that reestablishing that connection and that trust with myself has been an integral part of all the growth that I've experienced. I've become comfortable with my body. I started taking dance classes. I learned to find my authentic movement. I learned how to comfortably express myself. I learned how to feel safe telling people no. And I learned to trust the things that were happening to me would work out for the best. And I think the biggest thing that's happening right now in 2022 is that one of the trends that I have started is, this is my year of quit. So in the past, I would have only quit doing something once it set me to the point of being completely overwhelmed. That was traumatized, Adrienne. And now
Mm-hmm.
I'm to the point where I say, if this isn't serving me, this isn't bringing abundance into my life, then I don't want
Right.
it. And as part of that, what's happened is that now the opportunities I'm getting are people asking me to do things that I've never done before, and because they believe that I can do it. And so in the past, I would have said, no, I'm too scared to do that. I can't do it.
Right.
Today, I say, you know what? I'm going to give it a try and see what happens. And it's so that's where I'm at now.
And if you don't like it, you quit, and you're okay with quitting it.
Yeah.
And it's not for you. What you just said reminds me of two other conversations that I've had, which is so interesting, the through lines that I'm seeing through these stories. And one is, I talked to my friend Kristen, and she talked about radical acceptance of oneself. And in order to move forward, you must accept yourself where you are at that moment, and that every experience that comes before made you to this moment, and every experience after will help you accept yourself at that point. So I thought that was interesting, because you basically just said that again, is just, kind of accepting who you are and what you can do and what you're willing to do and what you're willing to take from others or yourself. And the other piece, I just talked to another friend of mine, and we were talking about being comfortable being uncomfortable, right? And that those new experiences, even if they are uncomfortable at first, could change your life. They could push you in a direction that you never even considered, because your old version of yourself was like, I'm not going to do that because I might not be good at it, or it's too scary or whatever excuse that we had for ourselves. And so that's what I heard from you. And it's an interesting through line. The more of these conversations that I have is that we all really face very similar things, some more extreme than others, some different solutions, whatever it may be. But as a human, there's communities within communities of people, and we can relate to each other. So I think your story is so powerful, knowing that you went an unconventional route to some people, right? And maybe this is the future for other people. And I think it's important to share.
I really do think that there is a future for this type of treatment as well. There are a lot of substances, both natural and chemical, that are being explored for the treatment of trauma. And I think you're aware of this too. I think that you've mentioned some other friends who have done some of these things, or we've shared articles about the science behind it. And I think that as the science reveals more and we become more aware that these are going to become more accepted treatment methods, because there are things that will offer long-term treatment, not just a treatment of the symptoms, a treatment of the imbalanced biochemistry. These are things that actually help the body to let go of the patterns that have been stored for trauma. There are some really good books written on the subject of, the body and trauma. One of my favorite books is The Body Keeps the Score by Vessel van der Kerk. It's a really good book. He's a medical doctor. He talks about, how our bodies react to all of the things that we experience. And it's completely true. Stress is one of the most damaging things that can happen to our body. And trauma is like experiencing that stress over and over and over again. And humans are not meant to live like that. We evolved biologically to deal with small pieces of stress, right? Being chased by a wild animal, for example. You run for a little bit and then you get to stop running, and right? We're not meant to be running all the time, and living in this modern environment exposes us to a lot of things that we haven't adapted to yet, and may not adapt to, because all the change is happening faster than our bodies can evolve. And I think it's really good to look at things that occur in nature as treatment options, because we evolved on this planet with them.
Yeah, and you know what, to that point, I think there needs to be a shift possibly in the pharmaceutical area, finding a way that we can actually get to the bottom of it and adjust that body chemistry, as you said, is probably, or hopefully, the way of the future.
There's been a lot of research on depression. William Walsh and Carl Pfeiffer were two men. William Walsh is a PhD chemist, and Carl Pfeiffer is a medical doctor, and they worked together to define the 5 biotypes of depression. And it explains the biochemical imbalances, which are different mechanisms that cause depression for most people. And their model explains why some medications work for some people but not for others, right? Because of the different chemical imbalances that can happen. They also talk about how a lot of those chemical imbalances can be fixed through natural means, although medication, may still be required as an augmentation, but they were able to successfully lower medication doses and get people off medication using their protocols. So, I think there's a lot of hope, but mainstream medicine is not always quick to respond to new ideas.
I would say that I want to know if you were to be able to talk to the Adrienne that had just got back from her parents' house after Thanksgiving, and she was going to listen. Is there anything that you could say to yourself that would help? Or do you think you had to just go through that?
Well, I think it was really important to go through it. One of the things that I struggled with was needing to know the outcome, needing to know what would happen, because it was part of that control issue that I had. And so back then, I think that it would have been helpful for me to have been told, yes, this is going to work, right? Everybody wants to know what the answer is. instead of having to go find it and do the work, right? We all want the shortcuts. And so I think
Right.
back then I would have wanted the answer and said, why couldn't somebody have told me this earlier? This is definitely going to work. But being the being the older, wiser, different person that I am today, I would say it's better that I didn't have that, even though I would have wanted it,
Right.
because it was a learning process for me, right? It was a process for me
Hmm.
learning to listen to my intuition, to learn to trust the things that my body and my mind were telling me to, you know, to explore and research the things that were potentially coming up and say, is this intuition? Is this what this looks like? Is this what this feels like? Can I trust it? And,
Right.
going down this path, I think was an integral process for me in learning how to trust that my body knew how to heal itself.
Yeah, and I think it probably taught you emotionally that you could trust yourself and that there was hope and you would help yourself get there.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think, I've watched the things that you've done over the last couple years, but now knowing the backstory and knowing this component, I'm blown away. I mean, I feel like I've always thought of you as someone that, like, if you had an ailment or you had something that was not working for you in that moment, you were going to research the heck out of it and find a way to a new normal baseline, whatever you want to call it. But now knowing this part of you, I'm so happy for you
Thanks.
because you've curated a new life for yourself in which whatever you want, you will make happen.
Yeah, it's totally true. And there have been some other health issues, and like we talked about, the biochemistry that needed to be
Right.
sorted out as well. There was a reason that I was doing that research. Besides the trauma, I also
Right.
have biochemical imbalances that predisposed me to a lifetime of anxiety, which probably predisposed me to being more likely to interpret those experiences as a complex trauma. And so those are things that I've
Right.
had to sort out for myself as well, too. And even recently, I'm still learning. I finally got a diagnosis. That's been a long time coming. I did a lot of genetic research. I requested, blood work. I had to find medical professionals that would listen. But how I got here was doing the emotional work.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Once I got to the place post mushrooms where doing the work and learning to calm my body and connect with myself and learning to let the trauma surface and deal with it was possible.
Mm-hmm.
Every time I process something, I find that new information comes into my awareness. Somehow somebody tells me about something that is interesting and relevant, or as I'm reading, I find a new research study that I hadn't come across before, and I wonder, why didn't I see this before? And so all of these things just kind of float into my field of awareness as I continue to clear the emotional trauma and the old beliefs that were keeping me in those patterns. And that's,
Right.
really how I believe that the body and the mind work together. When we work to better all of it, it all heals.
Mm-hmm. Right. And you're there. I mean, you're obviously a work in progress, as we all are, but you're at a point in which you're open to continuing that development. And I hope people that listen to this, that your story resonates with them and that they do whatever research they need to do to become in tune with their body and their mind like you did. And whatever path that means for them, that is totally okay. And I think I admire you for sharing your story, and I appreciate you coming on here with me.
Thanks. And I completely agree with you. I think the message here is that we all have our own path, and whatever it is, that's okay.
All right, my friend, thank you for being on with me, and hopefully we'll talk
All
soon.
right. Thanks for having me.
You've just listened to the Life Shift podcast. Please subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. For more information about how you can support the Life Shift podcast, please visit www.thelifeshiftpodcast.com. See you next time.